September 24th, 1942. Pitomnik Airfield, west of Stalingrad. Damp Volga wind combs through rows of camouflage Ju-52 transports, rattling the canvas vanes of a field generator. Searchlights idle, their white cones slumped like tired elbows. The night smells of aviation fuel and the iron dust of the steppe. Unteroffizier Ernst Klein, a 23-year-old Luftwaffe ground mechanic from Bremen, tugs his greatcoat closer and listens to the runway breathe. Metal ticks as engines cool, a far dog barks, and somewhere, down by the dispersal bay, a guard coughs, spits, stamps his boots. Then, an odd, papery sound. Not the brazen knock of a Daimler-Benz V12 or the guttural cough of a BMW 132 radial. This is smaller, almost intimate. A handsaw moving through soft pine. Klein tips his head and frowns. Nähmaschine, someone mutters, the sewing machine. The Feldwebel raises a hand. Ruhe. The sound falls silent, as if a fist has closed around it. No engine, only wind. The searchlight crew glance at one another. Hört ihr das? The youngest whispers. He is still new enough to be curious. The first bomb hits with a flat metallic concussion, more slap than thunder. Dirt leaps. A second follows. Closer, and now shouts erupt along the taxi strip, figures running, boots skidding over frost-silvered ground. A Ju-88 squats in its slit trench like a sullen beast. Dirt clacks off its skin as the third detonation billows. The siren's yelp comes late. Tracers stutter up in orange threads. The night answers with nothing. Klein drops, palms scraping. He tastes earth. Again that whisper, brief, drifting. A glide overhead so close he feels it in his teeth, like a page turned near his ear. He flinches, peering into the black. If there is an airplane, it is not where the flak looks. Those white cones rake empty clouds. The crew at the 2-centimeter flak Veerling squeeze off long, angry stitches at phantoms. Across the field, in a wedge of darkness between two fuel bowsers, a pair of silhouettes press their shoulders together. A navigator touches the pilot's sleeve and points. Stars pattern her exposed glove, chalk dots she sketched while waiting out the wind. The pilot nods, face tucked into a scarf stiff with engine oil. The altimeter sits low, barely a few hundred meters, while the slipstream strokes the fabric wings of the Polikarpov Po-2 like a cat's paw on silk. They had cut the throttle 2 minutes ago. Now they are a feather falling through a sea of guns. Right wing rack's empty, the navigator says into the slipstream, voice stolen as soon as it leaves her mouth. She is Sergeant Polina, 21, a farmer's daughter who learned to read by a coal stove in the Urals. The pilot is Junior Lieutenant Nadezhda Nadia Popova, 20 years old, too young for the hard stillness in her eyes. On her knee, a folded map. Pitomnik, Gumrak, the gravel road to Kalak. Pencil annotations around revetments. No radio, no armor, no guns. The instrument panel rattles like crockery in a drawer. They float the Po-2 across the far end of the field, the wind talking across struts, the earth climbing slowly, slowly. Then Nadia nudges the stick and lets the biplane slip. A quiet sideways fall. Below, the runway pulls like a dark ribbon. Now, Polina mouths. She reaches out, feels the bomb rack's cold pin, counts the heartbeat, pulls. The fourth bomb drops with the faintest shift in weight. Then the fifth. The gliding biplane is a moth shedding embers. Down there, the Luftwaffe ground crews see only the effects. Frenetic flares, a gout of sparks where fuel drums topple, two mechanics sprinting with a wheeled extinguisher that refuses to steer. Someone shouts, "Nachthexen," night witches. The name had bobbed around the Kuban rumor mill since summer, but to most at Stalingrad, it was still a soldier's fable. Tonight, under the sickle moon, it latches like a burr. Nadia thumbs the throttle open. The Shvetsov M-11 radio coughs, catches, thrums, with that familiar five-cylinder chatter the Germans call sewing. The Po-2 pulls, obedient and slow, skating the lip of the airfield. A searchlight finds them for a breath, just a tissue-colored wing and a black cross of struts, and then loses them because the Po-2 is climbing beneath the beam, too slow to hold the prediction of the battery commander's slide rule. Tracers pass behind like beads spilled from a broken string. At dispersal, Klein smashes a crate open with the butt of his wrench and drags a hose across gravel. Flames jitter around the wheels of a Ju-52. Schneller! The hose snaps to life, slewing. Someone laughs in panic. A siren winds down. The night tries to close. Then a final, sullen boom from the far fence, where the fuel truck had been parked because there was nowhere else to put it. In the air, Nadia levels and looks sideways at Polina. The navigator squints at her luminous wristwatch, seconds grubbed with pencil. She scratches a line on the map. Egress southeast to the rendezvous tree line. "Wind's curling," she says, breath frosting in the cockpit. "Go by the river bend." The Po-2 shivers agreeably. They had flown 3 sorties already tonight. The fourth is a gift of conditions, air like cold glass, the search crews behind the curve, and ground men quarreling with hoses. Back at their rough strip, a hacked rectangle of steppe a few versts east, Captain Yevdokiya Bershanskaya, their regimental commander, had leaned over the wing and spoken softly through the engine clatter. "One more if the wind allows. Drop on the runway approaches. Make them move their fuel." Now the runway recedes, a black tongue bitten at the edges by fire. A Ju-88's tail lifts as a tow tractor tries to pull it away. Klein coughs smoke and tastes burned rubber. He stares up into a sky that looks empty. Somewhere in that emptiness, a slow, antique biplane, wood, wires, linen, has just wounded a modern air force. The wind pushes, and the sewing machine's sound fades until there is only the clink of cooling metal and the chuffing of pumps. Klein wipes his face with a sleeve. "Was Wardas?" the new boy whispers. Klein hears himself answer in a voice that does not sound like his. "Witches, October 1942. Engels Air Base on the Volga. A wind that smells of wheat and smoke lifts dust around the hangars. In a drafty classroom, Marina Vraskova, aviator, celebrity, commissar in a plain tunic, rests a hand on a chalkboard that lists 3 regiments, all female, 586th Fighter, 587th Dive Bomber, 588th Night Bomber. "You will fly," she says, and her voice is steady with a promise she refuses to qualify. "You will fight, and you will be judged by the same measure as any guardsman." The 588th is the quietest on paper. U-2 biplanes, training machines renamed Po-2 after Polikarpov, the designer. Shvetsov M-11 5-cylinder engines that would not frighten a horse. Open cockpits that turned cheeks to stone in winter. But to Raskova, and to the young women who crowd the doorway, the windows, the hall, it is a scalpel this war requires. A thing that moves by patience and nerve, refusing to be where the enemy thinks war happens. Yevdokiya Bershanskaya, their regimental commander, is 30, with an instructor's uncompromising eye and a smile she spends sparingly. She walks the line at dusk with a clipboard and a scarf that hangs like a banner over her shoulder. "We will do it by procedure," she tells her section leaders. "Gypsy improvisation will get you killed." Yet the procedure, she writes, is born of audacity. Ropes to drag the Po-2s out of ruts, hand signals to time takeoffs by feel when the single flood lamp dies, a rule that the navigator's map must be smudged with the night's wind by midnight and clean again by dawn. They move from Engels to the steppe. Makeshift strips cut into grasses west of Salsk, northeast of Kotelnikovo. Places small enough that a compass swing can mistake the entire field for a needle. Mechanics, girls with sleeves rolled to the elbow, boys on loan who snicker until checked, learn to warm the M-11s with braziers built from shell crates. Oil sludges. Canvas tightens under a moon that scours the world to bone. Popova scrambles her first nights with a chest like a clenched fist. Her navigator, Polina, taps metrics from the panel with mittened fingers. Airspeed on the Po-2 is a suggestion, not a law. Gravity is the truest instrument. They count the seconds from the bend in the river to the stand of birch. 23 at this wind. At takeoff, the Po-2's tail rises reluctantly, the little lumber cart trying to become a bird. Wheels bump out of the ruts, and the low fabric wings drink the dark. The loads are comically slim by the standards of steel war. 2 50-kilogram bombs under the lower wings, sometimes 4 if the temperature and fuel allow. The 588th girls laugh about it in the mess tent, wrapping their hands around enamel mugs of barley tea. 2 buckets of hate, one says, and it becomes the name. They fly 6, 8, 10 sorties in a night when the air holds. Gloves stiffen, lips split. Breath makes frost on scarves that turn to armor. Their tactics become ritual. 3 Po-2s approach from different bearings, engines coughing as if apologizing for existing. One draws the flak and searchlights. The Harper, they call her, fanning the throttle, making noise, being seen. The other 2 slip the throttle to idle and drift in, stepping downwind like wolves circling a fire. The navigator leans out against her harness, headlamp off, reading the ground by shapes and seams, dark scars that are roads, a rectangle like a tongue that is runway, the cocktail glass starburst of revetments. When it is time, she yanks the bomb pin and feels the bomb let go. Weight leaving like a thought. The Germans learn to fear the whisper. It is not the weight of the bombs. It is the hour, the insistence, the nightly erosion of sleep. The way an airfield becomes a target even when the day is quiet. Floodlights move. Fuel dumps are pushed to the fence line, then into groves of scrub that were never meant to accommodate such flammable thinking. Ground crews are told to sleep with boots on. Anxiety becomes a new kind of weather. On a wind-skinned evening, Raskova visits the strip, her fur hat catching cinders from the brazier. Bershanskaya shows her a ledger of sorties. Times penciled in a tight hand, asterisks where crews did not return. Raskova's finger pauses over 3 stars on one night. "Weather?" she asks. "Weather," Bershanskaya says, and the rest is understood. In this regiment, loss is measured not in dazzled headlines, but in empty chairs at the map table. A Po-2 lands short, bumps, humps over a hump, skews. The pilot swears, corrects, coasts to the rope line where crew pull her into a slot, wings kissing the sleeves of her neighbors. The engine ticks down with homely patience. Polina peels off her goggles and laughs, because sometimes you only remain human by choosing to. "Sewed another seam," she tells the armorer, who grins and brings a fresh pair of buckets. Night after night, the ledger thickens. On the far side of the front, Klein and his crew light cigarettes they do not smoke and pretend a bomb shelter is just extra work. The rumor mill names the girls. Witches, hags, harpies, and all the words men choose when something terrifies them without conforming to the usual shape of fear. The Po-2s drift, small and stubborn as moths that have decided to be knives. December presses its thumb harder. The Po-2's fabric tightens until it pings like a drumhead under a glove tap. At the front, the cauldron around Stalingrad cinches, a belt pulled rung by rung. German signals traffic grows frantic with coordinates. Gumrak this hour, Pitomnik the next. A corridor described by suffering and frost. The 588th figures into this arithmetic as the smallest term that keeps changing the sums. On a white noon that pretends to be daylight, Popova stands in the lee of a truck, studying a new sketch, a Luftwaffe pattern of fuel depots drawn by a reconnaissance yak the previous afternoon, annotated with grease pencil arrows. Bershanskaya taps a circle. Here, and the southern approach. You will mark them for the night cruise, afternoon harassment, keep them awake from both ends of the clock. The word harassment makes Popova smile. If the war had a sense of humor, it would be this. They rig the Po-2s tight for daylight. Bombs lighter, fuel stubbier, a bit more throttle. The air is clear as ice water and just as kind. Tracer arcs are ornaments strung carelessly by men with cold hands. A Feldwebel of flak, all jaw and certainty, tracks with a slide rule and shouts corrections that look good on paper. But the Po-2's slow speed karate chops mathematics. Aiming for it with a Bofors is like leading a leaf. Popova drops a pair on empty barrels stacked too neatly by a man, with one eye for efficiency and the other eye asleep. She skids away, engine scalier in the cold, a web of frost cracking on the leading edge where the sun does a small good. A Bf-109 slashes by high and fast. Pilot baffled by this toy that does not behave like prey. He circles, overshoots, bleeds speed, sets up again. Popova watches him without fear. That makes sense. The odd truth. If a Messerschmitt stalls to match a Po-2's speed, the Messerschmitt is in danger of falling out of the sky while the biplane toddles along, smug as a donkey. He flashes past, too fast to aim, then gives up. Because there are other things to do in a winter where fuel is accounted in teaspoons. Twilight. Worse than night, because it lies. Polina checks her luminous watch again, teeth clenched so they will not chatter. The run to Gumrak after dusk is a low wandering along black threads that are roads and pale lashes that are sleet in the slipstream. A flare goes up near the taxi strip, trying to paint the intruder. Popova edges the throttle back to nothing. The prop windmills. The world grows enormous. Land, sky, the chew of flak. While the Po-2 hangs like a coat on an invisible peg. On the ground, Klein stands in a trench with a phone to his ear, while the battery commander shouts, bearing, elevation, range. The searchlight finds a brightness that it believes is an airplane. Flak stitches that brightness obediently. But the sewing machine is somewhere else, outside the light story, drawing its own line through the dark. A bomb drops short, dirt, no harm. And Klein exhales. The second lands among stacked crates in a way that will be in his dreams. The regiment pays, always. That same night, the crew of Sergeant Kira and Navigator Lena fail to return. There's a moment at the ledger table when the pencil hovers, as if grammar can delay reality. Bershanskaya writes the asterisk. Outside, a wind threatens to topple the brazier, and a mechanic named Sonia, barely 18, stands with her arms around the oil drum as if hugging heat might domesticate the cold. Popova goes to the far edge of the strip alone and looks east, where the sky is a wild animal with a red mouth. She presses the heel of her hand against her sternum hard enough to leave a mark. They were good, she says to no one, because that must count for something. The 588th learns to split its heart into compartments the way navigators split a map. One square for fear, one for memory, one for the task at hand. We will not fly with ghosts clinging to the struts. Bershanskaya tells them in the mess tent, voice no nonsense as a torque wrench. We will fly with our living and for the dead. The line is clear. Someone in the back sniffles. No one looks. By January, the corridor's edges are fraying. Gumrack becomes the last viable bone. The Po-2's harry takeoffs. Drop pairs at runway thresholds so that pilots must decide whether to choose the crater they know or the blackness they don't. Ju-52 crews resort to landing on hammered snow between rows of fires that look like a weird peacetime festival. Klein helps mark a temporary strip with lanterns that burn too low. Each time the wind gusts, the runway vanishes. Nachthexen, the battery commander says with a curl of the lip that means respect he will not give a name. That night, Popova and Polina glide so close to the southern perimeter that the scent of burned sausage and wet wool finds them. Bombs away, Polina whispers, and then adds, almost shyly, Happy New Year. Popova laughs, a sound that makes the canvas ripple. The bombs step off the rack obedient as children. Something on the ground runs in a crooked line that is a man changing his mind about which direction safety lives in. Spring scrapes frost off the steppe and reveals mud, all the old sins underneath winter's absolutions. The front flexes south. The 588th follows the war to the Taman Peninsula, where the Black Sea curves like a blade and the Cuban bridgehead becomes a stage of tangled runways and stubborn map arrows. The Luftwaffe and VVS duel overhead by day, vast, acrobatic quarrels of Yak-1s and Lay-5s nodding with BF-109Gs and FW-190s, smoke tails braided by wind. By night, the littlest planes in Russia claim the floor. A new field near Anapa smells of brine and kerosene. The girls sleep in dugouts that gather the damp and then pretend to be blankets. A supply officer produces a crate of lemons from God knows where. And for 3 nights, tea tastes like summer. Bershanskaya draws new procedures on butcher paper. Deconflict with naval flares from the Kerch Strait. Mark safe corridors from Army artillery. Step sorties to keep pressure on the German Tamenluftpark. Fuel, workshops, those tidy lines of spare propellers that look like flowers. The Germans have learned. Searchlights here are meaner, wiser hands. The flak belts are deeper, trimly sighted with textbook fields of fire. Night fighters prowl, BF-110s with Lichtenstein sets, Ju-88Cs whose crews wear black silk scarves like the night belongs to them. The 588th counters in the only currency it owns, patience. They fly lower, slower, more like smoke than airplanes. Navigators cut new timings for wind that licks in from the sea. They carry wooden rulers whose splinters darken with sweat. The name Night Witches ripens in the German camps. A Feldwebel swears he saw a pilot throw straw into the air to summon wind. A mechanic's wife writes in a letter that witches ride brooms made of glued-together propellers. Klein smirks at breakfast. He has smirked at worse. But when night falls, he keeps his boots by the bed. At the air park outside Temryuk, he lines up barrel after barrel beneath netting and tells himself witches are for children. Popova and Polina learn the coastline, the way the surf mutters even when it looks asleep. They mark the German airfield at Slavyansk na Kubi with a thumbnail print in grease. Threshold here, fuel there, workshops along the row of plane trees. At dusk, A mess of gulls argue over fish bones in the trench. Polina watches them angle into the wind and nods as if the birds confirm something she already knew. Their first run in the new sector goes wrong in a way that becomes wisdom. The Harper decoys the lights too well. The field stays dark, flak stingy with its flare revelations. Popova glides blind over something large and square and useless, a warehouse that houses linen and boots. The bombs grunt, go, thud. She hears men cursing faintly, thinks of wasted courage, and wants to kick the night for being so imprecise. Back at the map table, Bershanskaya carves the error into procedure. If they keep dark, we'll make our own light, she says. And the armorer, a girl with freckled hands, holds up a flare pistol like a chalice. The next night, the Harper carries flares in a canvas bag. On the first pass, she throws one high and left, a white coin tumbling. The flare works both ways. It risks painting the Harper for gunners, yes. But it also makes the runway a mouth again, and mouths can be fed. On the ground, Klein watches the flare blossom and feels rage rise like a fever. He hears aircraft carts clatter, men swearing, the resentful cough of a generator forced awake, and thinks of Bremen's clean streets. He prays, in his clumsy way, for a Messerschmitt's night teeth to catch something. A Ju-88C lifts, dirty, heavy, reluctant. Wrong tool, wrong job. But its crew are good and angry. The Po-2s fade from the flare's circle like patient moths. The Junkers prowls behind them and loses them to slowness, his own and the world's. The 588th's ledger grows fat with Kuban sorties. Irina Sebrova flies, small and imperturbable, setting a pace that makes the rest both proud and exhausted. Navigator Yekaterina Ryabova brings a joke to each pre-flight, like a charm against gravity. A crew returns with bullet holes stitched across the lower wing. Sonia pats the Po-2's skin as if consoling a dog. The regimental polytruck posts a clipping that calls them heroines. They roll their eyes, then tuck the clipping into someone's boot for luck. On a night boiled thin by wind, Popova brings the Po-2 across the fuel dump at a height so mean the heat wobbles her wings. Polina's hand is steady, the pin reluctant, then freed. The dump goes on its knees. Klein runs with his squad to pull a hose, but the hose is bitten in half by a shard of drum. He presses cloth to a friend's arm where shrapnel has made a mouth. Witches, the friend tells him through clenched teeth, and somehow the word helps. Summer fattens everything. Corners of lips, the flies, ambition. The Kuban bridgehead stiffens, then fractures. German formations shuffle backward over scabbed bridges under skies that no longer feel like theirs. The 588th earns a Guards title, 46th Guards Night Bomber, inked in the ledger by Bershanskaya with a hand that does not tremble. Because ceremony is still ceremony even when your boots are damp. They carry the honor the way they carry bombs. Carefully. Not as a reason to fly, but as a reason to keep flying. There are names on the board all summer. Popova, Sebrova, Ryabova, Gelman, a navigator whose eyes do not miss. Makarova and Ryabova together, grinning in a photograph that a signal corps man snapped just before the wind stole his cap. Maps are replaced daily, their corners gone soft with grease. The girls tuck messages into the cracks of the hut, little vows, little jokes. Sonia teaches a crow to steal shiny things from the political officer. When he complains, she swears it is the bird's ideological deviation. By July, the rhythm feels like something the body has always known. Pre-flight, tap wires, check turnbuckles, kick tires in a ritual whose seriousness hides behind the kick. Strap in, feel the leather bite your shoulder blades, smell oil and the old bread crust in your pocket for later. Taxi with your head on a swivel, because there is only one kerosene lamp for 3 rows of planes. And if you clip a wingtip, you will never forgive yourself. Take off. The tail muddies. The little engine gives what it can. The steppe lifts away. Over the line. The flak begins like distant hail, then grows into an argument you cannot win except by ignoring. Popova and Polina carry a ragged letter folded in their map. Ink bled by rain. A note from a mother in Ufa who has decided to address her daughter's friend because her daughter does not answer. Popova reads it sometimes when the wind makes the Po-2 a guessing game. Tell her, the letter says, that the apricots have come early. Popova imagines the apricots as yellow clocks. The Germans adapt again. They string wires near approaches. They move workshops under timber. They issue a standing order that fuel drums must lie in shallow pits, not as proud stacks that call to fire. Klein supervises the digging, boots wet, patience gone. At night, he listens between mortar rumbles for that paper whisper that signals a debt coming due. Sleep becomes a thing he stands in line for and sometimes is told is out of stock. A Ju-88C crew finally catches a Po-2, not Popova's. The radio log notes a brief exchange, a flare's skitter. A mechanic finds a piece of fabric in a field the next morning, crisped and light as ash. Bershanskaya writes asterisks again. She speaks minimal words at the funeral because words are not fuel, and grief is not a maintenance task. The regiment files past, coats straight. Popova does not look at the hole where her own name could have been. And yet, Kuban concludes itself, as all geography does, by being untenable. The 46th Guards lifts to new strips near the Donets, where grass is rougher and the midges are more ambitious. The ledger now includes decorations and scars. Gelman pins a citation to her tunic with a hand that remembers maps better than medals. The girls drink tea that tastes faintly of kerosene and talk about clothes as if the future will ask such questions, and they should have answers ready. On the far side of the lines, Klein watches a convoy clog a dust ribbon toward the west. He has become thin around the eyes. He carries a toolbox like a reliquary, reverent of the instruments that keep planes flying even as he curses their habits. The rumor net says the witches have been given guard status, and he feels a flare of irrational pride, like a man grudgingly admiring a thief who never stumbles. They will follow, he tells a new boy, who still thinks war is a map. They will follow, because their planes can land in a ditch and take off from a road. One night on the Donets, Popova and Polina misjudge wind by the width of a breath. The bombs step off early, walk a line along a fence instead of across the repair sheds. Angry sparks hop like fleas. Popova grimaces, corrects, opens throttle, and for a second the Po-2 seems to hang between choices. A searchlight snaps onto them with surgical hunger. For a heartbeat they are defined. Black rib bones inside a shell of light. Flak barks. Popova kicks rudder, skates sideways, dies to idle, and the light loses the patience that had made it a hunter. The beam slides on to something else. The M-11 starts again, after its sulky pause, with a cough that sounds like relief. Back on the strip, Bershanskaya notes times and wins. She draws a small graph no one else sees. Procedure adjusts. "We will approach from the far orchard," she says. The dogs do not bark there. Everyone nods, as if this is the most normal sentence in the world. Autumn undresses the trees one by one. The steppe shows its bones again. The 46th Guards rides the front westward in a staggered dance. Belgorod's outskirts, rivers with names like proverbs, villages that consist of a well and a memory. The nights lengthen until they feel permanent, like the war has made a treaty with darkness. Procedure takes on the stern compassion of a monastery. Mechanics wear burns, as if they are decorations. Sonia keeps her brazier lit with a mix of coal and stolen fence rails. Every morning, a new meter of fence missing. Every evening, a Po-2 warmed. The M-11 engines are creatures with moods. They prefer kindness to authority. Warm them wrong and they sulk, coughing oil like old men. Warm them right and they hum, light as gossip. Popova begins to feel her years in flying hours instead of calendars. Her back knows each brace of the seat. Her fingers can count air screws by vibration. Polina adds new scrawls to her maps that resemble prayers. A sketch of a farmhouse that smells of pigs, a note that a creek sounds like song at certain winds, a warning that at one crossroads a horse always stands perfectly still as if carved. They make a language out of the world that exists when the rest of the world is asleep. The Germans do not sleep. Klein's unit has been reattached to a field that changes names as often as it changes positions. He writes home in sentences that begin with the weather and end with a confession that the night has hands. He sharpens bayonets that will never be used, for want of anything else to fix. He tells a comrade, "The witches don't kill you. They move into your head and rearrange the furniture. Night fighters are better now. Some carry upward-firing cannon, Schrage music that stitches the belly of bombers that never see the muzzle flash. Against a Po-2, this cleverness is less use. The little biplane is a floor too low for that ceiling trick. Still, the air is more dangerous. A Bf-110 flashes past one night, dragging a sound like torn canvas. Popova hears rounds punch the sky behind her. Polina leans harder over the side, a human wind vein. They both hold their breath. Superstition, physics, both. A frozen night in December makes the world a brittle toy. The strip is a sheet of glass. Wheels that lift do not want to settle. Bershanskaya argues the ledger down to fewer sorties because there is no use killing pilots on the ground for a war in the sky. Popova goes anyway, volunteer among volunteers, because the repair sheds west of the river are pumping planes, and she believes in arithmetic. The flare pistol misfires on the Harper's first pass. The field remains a hole. Popova glides on instruments that consist of her bones and the set of her teeth. Polina counts. The river bend, the orchard, the dog that does not bark tonight because it has found a better dream. Bombs go. The earth answers. On egress, a wire we have never mentioned nicks the lower wing, with a sound that is not a sound, but a sentence. They land long, fast, a slide saved by the grace of thick boots and the stubborn willingness of the Po-2 to forgive errors. They repair with thread and dope, the mender's art. Sonia works in a scarf that smells of smoke, hands red with cold, patience of a saint no one will canonize. She runs her palm along the repaired fabric and nods like an elder blessing a child. "Go again," she tells the plane. She does not trouble the pilot with the order. Letters arrive in clumps and then not at all. Raskova's name circles back through rumor and sorrow. Lost earlier, far from this strip, a ferry flight turned elegy. The girls stand stiff and listen to a political officer say words that bounce off the cold. They hold their grief in their fists and blow on it like coals. Then they fly, because that is the only grammar the front recognizes. On a night where frost makes stars feel within reach, Popova and Polina cut throttle over a field that had once tried to kill them. The searchlights hesitate. The crew transferred, the new boys learning the textbook lies. The bombs step down into a pattern Polina drew while warming her hands over Sonia's brazier. The shed folds inward, a man's careful work consuming itself in a lesson. Klein, 2 fields away and older by several lives, wakes with the sensation that he has forgotten his own face.